The detention cell hummed with the kind of sterile, soul-crushing frequency that only military installations could perfect. General Krath-Vorn of the Hegemony's Third Fleet pressed his scaled forehead against the cold metal wall, wondering how the hell his life had come to this. 3 days ago, he commanded 17 battle cruisers and 40,000 troops. Now he was begging humanity for protection like some common deserter. Pathetic, he muttered in his native tongue, the words tasting bitter on his forked tongue. The door hissed open, and Krath-Vorn didn't bother turning around. He heard those footsteps before. Heavy boots, measured pace, the confident stride of someone who'd never known real defeat. Colonel Martinez stepped into the cell, datapad in hand, expression as welcoming as a neutron star's surface. "Still sulking, General?" Martinez asked, settling into the lone chair across from the cell's Spartan cot. "That's not going to help your case much." Krath-Vorn finally turned, his 4 eyes focusing on the human officer. Martinez was typical of his species. Unremarkably small, soft-looking, with that infuriating air of casual competence that had somehow conquered half the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very traits he'd once dismissed as weakness were now his only hope for survival. "My case." Krath-Vorn's laugh came out as more of a bark. "Colonel, we both know how this ends. Your refugee council will stamp denied on my application, and I will be handed back to the Hegemony in a gift-wrapped box. It will probably execute me on live broadcast just to make a point." Martinez leaned back, studying the alien general with those unsettling human eyes. Too expressive, Krath-Vorn thought. No wonder humans were such terrible poker players against his species. Every emotion flickered across their faces like neon signs. "You might be right," Martinez said finally. "The council's pretty split on your case. Half think you are genuinely seeking asylum. The other half think this is some elaborate hegemony plot to infiltrate our refugee program. And which half do you belong to, Colonel?" Martinez smiled, and it wasn't particularly reassuring. "I'm not on the council, General. I'm just the guy who gets to babysit war criminals until the paperwork gets sorted." "War criminal," Krath-Vorn repeated slowly. "Is that what I am now? You tell me. Your fleet glassed 3 human colonies before you had your sudden change of heart. Vega Prime, New Sol, Haven Station. Ring any bells?" The memories hit like physical blows. Orbital bombardments turning cities to molten slag. Evacuation ships trying desperately to escape atmosphere before the next wave of plasma cannons found them. Krath-Vorn had given those orders. He'd watched those worlds burn from his command deck, feeling nothing but professional satisfaction at targets eliminated. "I was following orders," he said, the words hollow even to his own ears. "Sure you were. Just like every other butcher who ever wore a uniform." Martinez's voice carried no anger, just tired disappointment. "The difference is, most of them don't show up at our doorstep 3 months later claiming they have seen the light." Krath-Vorn's tail lashed against the floor, a nervous habit he'd never quite managed to suppress. "You think this is easy for me? You think I enjoyed watching my own people brand me a traitor? Korvashtel was my bondmate for 30 cycles. We served together, bled together, rose through the ranks together. When I refused to participate in the Canterbury massacre, he put a plasma bolt through my second heart himself. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Martinez consulted his datapad, scrolling through what Krath-Vorn assumed was his file. Probably full of tactical assessments, psychological profiles, kill counts. The bureaucratic summation of a life spent in service to an empire he no longer believed in. "Canterbury," Martinez said eventually. "Population 12 million. Mostly civilian mining operation with minimal defensive capabilities. You refused to participate in that attack. The strategic value was negligible. The Hegemony wanted to make an example, not win a war. I told High Command that glassing Canterbury would only strengthen human resolve, make your species fight harder." Krath-Vorn moved to the cell's small window, staring out at the human installation beyond. "They said I was going soft. Said spending too much time fighting humans was making me think like one. And were they right?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Krath-Vorn considered his answer carefully. In hegemony culture, admitting to foreign influence was tantamount to admitting to mental illness. But this wasn't the hegemony anymore. Perhaps, he said quietly, your species is different from what we were taught to expect. We were told humans were weak, cowardly, prone to panic under pressure. Imagine my surprise when your colonies fought to the last defender, when your evacuation ships turned around to rescue survivors instead of saving themselves, when captured human officers told me to go mate with a black hole instead of begging for their lives. Martinez actually chuckled at that. Sound about right. We are not great at begging. No, you're not. You're also not great at surrendering, running away, or accepting defeat. It's honestly pretty annoying from a military perspective. I will take that as a compliment. The data pad in Martinez's hands chimed, and his expression shifted to something more serious. He read the message twice before looking up at Krath-Vorn. The council's reached a preliminary decision, he said. They want to see you in person. Tomorrow, 0900 hours. Krath-Vorn felt his stomach drop to somewhere around his feet. That was fast. Yeah, well, your timing couldn't have been worse. The Hegemony just launched another offensive against the Outer Rim colonies. 30 systems under siege, millions of refugees streaming toward human space. The last thing the Council wants to deal with is a defector who might be playing a long game. I'm not. I know, Martinez interrupted. At least I think I know. But thinking isn't knowing, and the Council deals in certainties. They need proof that you are genuine, not just another hegemony spy with an elaborate cover story. Krath-Vorn returned to his cot, suddenly feeling every one of his 67 cycles. What kind of proof could I possibly offer? I have already provided intelligence on hegemony fleet movements, tactical doctrines, command codes. What more do they want? They want to know why. Martinez said simply. Why now? Why you? Why should humanity trust a general who spent 15 years killing human civilians? The truth was complicated, messy, full of contradictions that didn't fit neatly into official reports. How could he explain that the turning point hadn't been some grand moral revelation, but something as simple as watching a human child share her food ration with a wounded enemy soldier? How could he describe the slow erosion of certainty that had eaten away at his convictions like acid? Have you ever been certain of something, Colonel? Absolutely, completely certain that you were right, that your cause was just, that your enemies deserved whatever fate you delivered. Martinez nodded slowly. Afghanistan. I was convinced we were the good guys, bringing freedom and democracy to oppressed people. Look how that turned out. Exactly. Except for me, the realization came in the middle of active combat. I was standing on the bridge of my flagship, watching human defenders make their final stand on some backwater colony whose name I can't even remember. They were outnumbered 50-1. No hope of rescue, no chance of survival. Any rational military force would have surrendered. Krath-Vorn's voice grew quieter, more reflective. But they didn't surrender. They fought like demons, every man, woman, and child who could hold a weapon. And when we finally broke through their defenses, when we had them cornered in the colony's central shelter, their leader, a sergeant, maybe 25 years old, he activated the shelter's self-destruct rather than let us take prisoners. Scorched earth tactics. We are good at those. No, Colonel, you misunderstand. The shelter was full of non-combatants. Elderly, injured, children too young to fight. The sergeant killed his own people rather than let them be captured. At first, I thought it was cowardice, desperation. But then I accessed the shelter's internal communications. Martinez leaned forward, clearly invested in the story now. What did you find? A vote. They'd taken a vote among the civilians about whether to surrender or die fighting. The decision was unanimous. Every single person in that shelter, from the oldest grandmother to teenagers barely out of school, chose death over capture. Not because they were afraid of torture or execution, because they believed, truly believed, that their sacrifice would inspire others to keep fighting. The cell fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems. Krath-Vorn stared at his claws, remembering how they'd shaken as he read those communication logs. That's when I realized we weren't fighting an enemy, Colonel. We were fighting an idea. And ideas, as your species has proven time and again, are significantly harder to kill than flesh and blood. Martinez set down his datapad, giving Krath-Vorn his full attention. So you decided to defect. Not immediately. It took months of watching similar scenarios play out across dozens of worlds. Human parents teaching their children to build improvised explosives. Elderly couples volunteering for suicide missions. Wounded soldiers crawling back to battle rather than accepting medical evacuation. Your species doesn't just fight wars, Colonel. You become the war. Some might call that fanaticism. Some might. I call it the most terrifying thing I have ever encountered. The hegemony conquers through superior technology and overwhelming force. We break our enemies with a fight, then their capacity to resist. But how do you break something that grows stronger when broken? How do you defeat an enemy that turns every loss into motivation for future victory? Martinez was quiet for a long moment, processing the general's words. Finally, he spoke. You still haven't answered the question, General. Why should we trust you? Krath-Vorn met his gaze directly, all four eyes focusing on the human officer. Because I'm not asking for your trust, Colonel. I'm asking for the chance to earn it. I know what the hegemony is planning. I know their weaknesses, their fears, their deepest strategic concerns. I can help you win this war, but only if I'm allowed to live long enough to prove my worth. And if the Council says no, then I die, Krath-Vorn said simply, either at the hands of my former comrades or in some hegemony torture chamber, screaming state secrets until my hearts finally give out. Either way, humanity loses a valuable asset and gains another martyr to inspire future resistance. Martinez stood, straightening his uniform with practiced efficiency. Tomorrow's hearing won't be easy, General. The Council's going to ask hard questions, demand detailed answers, probably try to trip you up with inconsistencies in your story. They will want to know about every atrocity you have committed, every order you have given, every human life you have taken. I understand. Do you? Because once you walk into that hearing room, there's no going back. You will either be granted asylum and spend the rest of your life helping us fight your own people, or you'll be handed over to hegemony justice. No middle ground, no compromise, no last-minute deals. Krath-Vorn rose as well, drawing himself up to his full height. Even with his natural size advantage, Martinez somehow managed to project more authority than most hegemony admirals. Colonel, I stopped being a hegemony general the moment I refused to murder 12 million civilians for the sake of propaganda. What I am now, what I choose to become from this point forward, that's up to your people to decide. I can only offer what I have. My knowledge, my experience, my absolute commitment to seeing the hegemony defeated. Martinez moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the control panel. One last question, General. If the Council grants your asylum, if you are given the chance to fight alongside humanity against your former empire, what happens when this war is over? What happens to a hegemony general with nowhere left to go? The question hit harder than Krath-Vorn had expected. He'd been so focused on surviving the next 24 hours that he hadn't really considered what victory might look like. Assuming humanity won, assuming the hegemony was defeated or forced to accept peace terms, what place would there be for someone like him in the aftermath? I suppose I will find out, he said finally, assuming I live that long. Martinez nodded and keyed the door open. Get some rest, General. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As the door sealed shut behind the human officer, Krath-Vorn settled back onto his cot and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the walls of his cell, the galaxy continued its slow spiral toward either peace or total annihilation. The war that had defined his adult life was entering a new phase, and he was about to find out which side of history he'd be remembered on, if he was remembered at all. The Refugee Council chamber felt like a courtroom designed by someone who'd never seen justice dispensed fairly. 12 humans sat behind a curved titanium desk, their faces ranging from openly hostile to cautiously neutral. Krath-Vorn stood in the center of the room, shackled at wrists and ankles, feeling like a specimen under examination. General Krath-Vorn of the Hegemony Third Fleet, announced Counselor Barnes, a gray-haired woman whose voice could cut through battle armor. You stand before this tribunal seeking asylum within human territory. Given your extensive military record against human interests, this is an unusual request. Unusual would be one word for it, muttered Counselor Jackson from the far end of the table. His file sat open before him, probably containing every engagement Krath-Vorn had ever fought. Every human life on his conscience. Dr. Lisa Park, the council's xenopsychologist, leaned forward. General, let's begin with your service record. You commanded fleet operations during the Vega Prime bombardment. 17 million casualties. Can you explain your thought process during that engagement? The question hit like a physical blow, but Krath-Vorn had expected it. Vega Prime was designated a high-value military target by Hegemony Strategic Command. Intelligence indicated significant shipyard facilities and fleet staging areas. I executed orders according to established protocols. Established protocols that included glassing civilian population centers before conducting tactical strikes on military installations, Barnes said coldly. 17 million dead, General. Mostly non-combatants. Yes. The word came out barely above a whisper. I followed standard doctrine. Eliminate civilian morale first, then neutralize military capability. It was efficient. Counselor Peterson, a younger man with burn scars covering half his face, stood abruptly. Efficient? My wife and daughter were on Vega Prime when your efficient protocols turned them into radioactive ash. Tell me about efficiency, General. The room went dead silent. Krath-Vorn looked at Peterson's scars, obviously from some previous battle, and felt something twist in his chest. I cannot justify what I did to your family, Counselor. I can only tell you that the general who gave those orders is not the same being standing before you today. Convenient timing for a moral awakening, Jackson said dryly. Right around the time the war started going badly for your side. The war has been going badly for my side since it started. Krath-Vorn replied with more heat than he'd intended. We underestimated your species so completely that our entire strategic doctrine became obsolete within 6 months of first contact. Dr. Park made a note on her tablet. Elaborate on that assessment, General. Krath-Vorn took a breath, organizing his thoughts. The shackles made gesturing impossible, so he had to rely on words alone. Hegemony military philosophy assumes rational actors making rational decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. We conquer through demonstration of superior force. Most species surrender when the alternative is extinction. Most species aren't human, Barnes observed. Exactly. Your species treats extinction-level threats as motivation rather than deterrence. The more desperate your situation becomes, the more creative and dangerous your response is. It's militarily insane and strategically brilliant. Counselor Williams, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. You are saying we are too stupid to know when we are beaten? No, Counselor. I'm saying you are too stubborn to care when you are beaten. There's a significant difference. Peterson sat back down, but his glare could have melted hull plating. Pretty words, General. But you still haven't explained why we should believe this conversion is genuine rather than an elaborate intelligence operation. This was the moment Krath-Vorn had been dreading. How do you prove sincerity to people who have every reason to doubt you? How do you demonstrate a change of heart to species whose hearts you have broken? Because he said slowly, I'm about to tell you something that will guarantee my execution if this information reaches Hegemony Command. The council members exchanged glances. Barnes leaned forward. We are listening. The Hegemony is planning to deploy biological weapons against human colonies within the next 30 rotations. Specifically engineered pathogens designed to target human genetic markers while leaving other species unaffected. The reaction was immediate and electric. Half the council started talking at once, voices raised in alarm and anger. Barnes hammered her gavel repeatedly until order returned. That's a violation of the Galactic Biological Weapons Treaty, Dr. Park said, her face pale. The Hegemony never signed that treaty, Krath-Vorn replied. We consider it a human attempt to limit superior military technology. The deployment is being coordinated by Admiral Zenth Korvok of the Fifth Fleet. He's positioning bioweapon delivery systems in the Centaurus sector as we speak. Jackson was frantically taking notes. What kind of delivery systems? How many targets? Automated probe missiles designed to look like standard reconnaissance drones. 47 targets initially, focusing on agricultural worlds and population centers. The pathogen has a 96% fatality rate and spreads through atmospheric contact. The silence that followed was deafening. Krath-Vorn watched as the implications sank in. Billions of human lives hung in the balance, and he just handed their potential salvation to the very people he'd spent years trying to destroy. Barnes broke the quiet. Why should we believe this intelligence is accurate? How do we know this isn't disinformation designed to waste our resources chasing ghosts? Because, Krath-Vorn said, meeting her gaze directly, Admiral Zenth Korvok is my clutch brother. We hatched from the same breeding pod, served together for 30 cycles. He personally briefed me on the bioweapon project before my defection. I know his tactical preferences, his deployment schedules, even his command codes. Command codes that you're willing to share? Williams asked skeptically. Command codes that I already shared with Colonel Martinez yesterday, along with detailed fleet positions, tactical assessments, and strategic vulnerabilities throughout the Fifth Fleet's operational area. Dr. Park looked up from her notes. General, assuming this intelligence is accurate, you have just committed an act of treason that will result in not just your own death, but likely the deaths of any Hegemony personnel associated with you. Family members, former subordinates, anyone who ever served under your command. Why would you do that? The question struck at the heart of everything Krath-Vorn had been wrestling with for months. Why indeed? What could possibly justify betraying not just his government and military, but his own species? Because, he said quietly, I finally understood what humans have been trying to tell the galaxy for the past 3 years. Some things are more important than survival. Some principles are worth dying for. Some fights are worth fighting even when you know you can't win. Peterson leaned forward, his scarred face intent. And what fight is that, General? The fight for the right to exist without permission. The fight to protect the weak from the powerful. The fight to prove that might doesn't automatically make right. Krath-Vorn's voice grew stronger as he spoke. The hegemony believes in order through dominance. Humans believe in order through justice. I have seen what dominance creates, counselors. I have been its instrument for most of my adult life. I'd like the chance to see what justice might accomplish instead. Barnes studied him for a long moment. Justice, General? Is that what you think this is about? After everything you have done, everything you have been part of, you think you can find justice on our side? I think I can try, Krath-Vorn replied. I think I can spend whatever time I have left working to undo some of the damage I have caused. I can't bring back the dead, but I can help ensure their sacrifice wasn't meaningless. The council went into closed session for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Krath-Vorn stood in the center of the room, listening to the muffled argument behind the privacy screen, wondering if he'd just signed his own death warrant for nothing. When the screen finally retracted, Barnes's expression was unreadable. General Krath-Vorn, this council has reached a decision regarding your asylum request. Here it comes, Krath-Vorn thought. The moment that would determine whether he died as a traitor to the hegemony or a failure to humanity. Your request is conditionally approved. The words took a moment to register. Conditionally approved. Not the unconditional rejection he'd expected, but not the clean slate he'd hoped for either. The conditions, Barnes continued, are as follows. First, you will be assigned a permanent human liaison officer who will monitor your activities and report directly to this council. Second, any intelligence you provide will be verified through independent sources before action is taken. Third, you will submit to regular psychological evaluation to assess your continued reliability. Krath-Vorn nodded, not trusting his voice. Fourth, Peterson added, his tone still hostile. You will face a formal war crimes tribunal once this conflict is resolved. Asylum doesn't mean immunity, General. You will answer for what you have done, one way or another. I understand, Counselor. Barnes stood, and the rest of the council followed suit. General, you have been given something incredibly rare in wartime. A second chance. Don't waste it. As the shackles were removed and Krath-Vorn was led from the chamber, he caught sight of Colonel Martinez waiting in the corridor. The human officer's expression was carefully neutral, but there was something that might have been approval in his eyes. "Well," Martinez asked as they walked toward what Krath-Vorn assumed would be new quarters. "Conditional approval. I'm your problem now, Colonel." Martinez actually smiled at that. "Lucky me. Come on, General. We have got a war to win, and apparently I'm your new babysitter." 6 months later, Krath-Vorn stood on the bridge of the Human Alliance vessel Defiance, watching Hegemony bioweapon facilities burn in the void. The intelligence he'd provided had been accurate. 47 human worlds had been saved from biological extinction. The cost had been acceptable. The victory had been complete. Admiral Zent Korvak's final transmission still echoed in Krath-Vorn's mind. "You always were too soft for this war, clutch brother. Die well." "You too," Krath-Vorn had whispered back, watching his brother's flagship break apart under sustained human fire. Now, as the last of the bioweapon platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light, Krath-Vorn felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Not quite peace, not exactly redemption, but something close to both. "Good work, General," Martinez said, joining him at the observation deck. "The intelligence you provided saved billions of lives." "It's a start," Krath-Vorn replied, "though I suspect I have a long way to go before anyone considers my debt paid." Martinez was quiet for a moment, watching the debris fields spread across space. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another war criminal looking for an easy way out. And now I think you might actually be what you claim to be. A soldier who figured out he was fighting for the wrong side." Krath-Vorn nodded slowly. "The War Crimes Tribunal Peterson mentioned. When this is over, I will face that judgment." "Yeah, you will. And knowing humans, it won't be pretty." "Good," Krath-Vorn said, surprising them both. "It shouldn't be pretty. Some debts can only be paid in full." As the Defiance prepared to jump to hyperspace, heading toward the next battle in what had become a very different war, Krath-Vorn reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd gone from conqueror to exile to ally, and somehow found something resembling honor in the process. The galaxy was still burning. The war was far from over. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, General Krath-Vorn of the former Hegemony Third Fleet was fighting for something worth believing in, and that, he thought, made all the difference.